But our demonstrator tonight is Dave Bell. He's going to do windowed bullet pens. And I turn it over to Mr. Bell.
Thank you very much. If I could just set somebody to share me on this Zoom as well, that'd be nice. Perfect. Thank you. All right. Thanks for having me. Yeah, my name is Dave Bell. I'm from a little town called Elora in the province of Ontario in the big country of Canada. You saw my thing. I started out basically in the basement of an old farmhouse. It was a dairy farm. I've since progressed from that. I'm now working for a power company here in Ontario, Ontario Power Generation. And I hold a few different trades, millwright, welder, and I'm also a certified non-destructive testing technician. And I'm about 3 years from retirement, so I really don't care about the trades anymore. I just want to get to the end of it. I want to retire. And of course, everything I want to do is in this shop. That and some traveling as well. But I've been turning pens for probably 15 years anyway. It actually was kind of funny when I got the request to demo. Some of the first pens I ever turned were bullet pens with deer antler. Of course, the hunters thought that was a real big idea. And that went on for quite a long time. And then my turning, I wanted to start doing other things besides pens. So I'm doing bowls now, vases, pepper mills, wine stoppers, ice cream scoops, you name it. I turn them all. I don't have a specific thing that I turn all the time. I like to turn just about anything and everything. Segmented takes a lot of time. Because I'm working, I don't have a lot of time for the segmented part of it. I sort of work my way through it when time's available. And with that, our guild, well, the one guild that I belong to 3 guilds. The main guild that I belong to is the Waterloo Wellington Woodturners Guild. I'm the vice president, and we do a lot of the wig stands for cancer. So I spend a lot of my time cutting blanks up for other people. I get help from the other members, but it just seems that I have all the equipment, so everybody kind of defaults to my shop. I also belong to the Kincardine, the Grey Bruce Woodturners Guild out of Kincardine. I was a president there for about 6 to 8 years, roughly. And I also belong to what they call the Thames Valley Woodturners Guild, which is down in London, Ontario, which is very close to Detroit, to the border there. So, yeah, so tonight we're going to do a window casing bullet pen. It was funny after the request for the demo and that, I thought I better dig out all my tools. So I turned one a couple of days later, and I posted it. I thought it was about 8 years since I'd last done one. It turns out the next day on Facebook, it popped up. Just so happened to be a window casing bullet pen, and it was 12 years. So it's been a long time since I've done this. But yeah, the first one I went and did after 12 years, spectacular. So actually it'll pop up on the screen here shortly as soon as I get off this computer. But yeah, I'm not going to do a whole lot for the pen blank itself. It's from a slimline kit. I'll talk about that. I'm sure everybody knows how to make a slimline pen. I'm just robbing the parts from it. I'll tell you what I'm taking from it. I'll go through a little bit of prepping the pen blank and all that kind of stuff. And I'll actually have to turn the blanks tonight to see, so you can see what's different about a slimline versus the window casing bullet pen. And because it's Canada Day today, The two blanks that I chose to use are have some red in them. It's spalted maple. They're actually quite nice. I think they're going to look really sharp when they're done, when they're turned, especially in the window casing. Yeah, I think that's about it. Are there any questions before I begin?
I don't think so.
Okay. One other thing, if you do have questions as we go, if I could get Andrew or somebody to be the moderator and put your questions in the chat box, and that way Andrew or whoever can stop me midstream and I can answer the questions as we go. There's some pretty technical things that I do, and there's a lot of things that I've done in preparation for jigs and fixtures that are custom made. They're not available to anybody unless you make them. So we will begin. So that's the pen that I did. Excuse me. That's the window casing pen. It's the windows on both sides, and we have the bullet clip with it, and of course 30-06, and that is the bullet tip is an actual full metal jacket tip that I'm going to actually drill one out tonight, and you can see me do all that. Get the lead out of it. I don't use heat. I used a couple of different drill sizes, and I use the heat from the drilling. It lets it release. But this is what we're going to accomplish tonight. The first thing I like to do is to get the bullet tip prepared and get it drilled out. And with that, I use collet chucks. And I actually have two styles of collet chucks. I have the Beal collet chuck, and then I can't even remember where I got the other one from. I think it was from PSI, if I'm not mistaken. And I apologize. Some of the places where I go shopping here in Canada, you can't. I think the favorite one for you guys in the States is Harbor Freight. We have something similar to that. It's called Princess Auto. It's about the same quality of stuff too. It's all offshore stuff. And you get what you pay for. I'm sure you're all used to that. Excuse me. With the bullet tips, I have to take off roughly a 1/16 of an inch off the end of this before I start doing any drilling. And the reason I take it off is because the pen tip size is basically the same size as the bullet tip. So I actually need a flat face to work off of. And that's easily done with a file. Use the coarse raspy side, then go down to the fine side. There's not going to be a whole lot left. The bullet tip, the copper thickness, there's not much left when you're done. They're very fragile. The other thing you can do is watch for the lead. I look for the lead in the bullet tip itself. Just let me show you that here. I'm not sure if you can see that or not. there's a little bit of lead showing from the inside. So to determine the drill size for that, we measure the tip of the slim line refill, and it works out that that ends up being 5/64 of an inch. Before I run the drill into the end, I like to use a center drill. For any of you that don't know what a center drill is, I'm sure you do, being we're all pen makers. This is center drill, and it is what machinists use quite often.
Hey Dave, Robert wants to know where you get your pen kits.
In Canada, I buy my pen kits from William Woodwright. And ironically, William Woodwright imports pen kits from Berea, PSI, and I can't even remember. There's a couple other places that they get them from. William Woodwright is the largest pen kit supplier in Canada.
And what about the bullets?
The bullets, so the bullets themselves, I just go to any of the local supply stores, and I order the Hornday 308 full metal jacket bullet tips. And they have to be a full metal jacket, with the exception, if I do the odd 270, they show, when you get them, they have a red tip in them, at least the ones that I order do. And 50 cals, I make those. The lead has to stay in those. Somebody has to be nice and sneak those across the border to Canada for me. Those are hard to come by in Canada, 50 cals. 300 mags, so using the 308s as well for those. And those are about the only sizes that I really use. You can go to the big box store, like, actually I think they're closed now. The big fishing store we used to have here in Canada. But there's lots of gun shops that we can still pick this up and order this stuff from. And as far as the casings go, I used to order, well, I only ordered once. I ordered 30-06 bullet casings, brand spanking new, all to be loaded. Of course, I wasn't loading them. And I found out that spent casings are actually better than brand new casings. I don't know if it's because the casing, because it's after it's fired in the chamber, that it actually trues the casing up, or what it is, but yeah, I find that spent casings run truer than brand new casings do. So I stick with my spent casings. And one of the luxuries we have up here is when gentlemen like yourself come up from the States, because we don't have them in Canada, but we can get the nickel plated. So I like using these. These are really nice because when you actually put the window in these, you have the nice nickel surface, and then the window is created by the brass that is inside. So these are really nice for making window casing bullet pens. That's typically all I use these for, because they're not that easy to come by. Does that answer that for you?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
You're welcome. So center drill in, and I usually set my speed around 500-600 RPM, and all I want to do is start the center of this so that I can begin to drill it. I don't want to go very far in. And these do not run absolutely perfectly true. As much as I would like them to, they don't. So with a 5/64 drill bit, I'm going to drill in, probably 3/8 of an inch, not much further. And this puts my hole for my pen refill in there, and then I'm going to use my pen refill to actually check it. Drilling lead can be fun or it can be horrendous. I just take it easy. As we all know, lead has a low melting point. Check that with the refill. And it just goes in, which is exactly what we want. We don't want a sloppy hole in there. So once I have that done, I'm going to clean up what I can from this end. I'm just going to use some 600 grit sandpaper and just lightly buff it out. And just round over that. I'm going to come back and do this again after, but I just want to get it cleaned up now. So I don't know if anybody's ever reloaded or not, but when they make bullets, the projectiles, the end of the bullet is actually tapered in. And in order to get the lead out, we have to remove that taper. So what I do is, with a bigger center drill, I will go in and I will drill this out until I basically create a chisel point with the copper using the center drill, and then I will drill out the rest of the lead on the inside.
And what size collet are you using?
This is a 5/16 collet. So that's got a chisel point right to a fine edge on it. Now I'm going to go in with a 7/64 drill bit, and I'm going to go in roughly 1/2 inch. Because I can't go any deeper than that, or what happens is the OD of the drill bit will go into the ID of the copper and destroy it. So I had a mark on my drill bit here at 1/2 inch. And I will drill in there. As you can see, that pulled out a nice little sleeve of lead. That's the 7/64. Now we'll take the 5/64 drill bit and we're going to go into the roughly 3/4 of an inch, and I have that marked on my drill bit as well. And take the remainder of the lead out. Oh. That's all the rest of the lead that was inside the bullet tip. There's no lead in that now. Now while that's in there, I'm just going to clean that up a bit with a file and some sandpaper. Nobody's going to see this because this is going to end up inside the bullet casing, but I like to just clean it up anyway. So as you can see, there's the mark on the bullet tip right here. That's going to go up inside the casing. So what I like to do is fit it in right up to here. I only hand tighten the collar because this is hollow now and it's thin. And all I want to do is clean this up so that it's basically finished. Whereas as close to a polished finish as I use. You can buff these right out after. You can powder coat them at a certain stage as you're making them. There's lots of options. I typically give them a nice sand finish. And then the window casing gets a sanded finish as well, but it's in a different direction. So it just appears different. But it's basically up to you as a pen maker what kind of a finish you put on these. And the 4/0 steel wool is nice. Just be careful, it's grabby. That's your bullet tip finished. Other than assembly now, and then any more polishing you want to do to it later on. Right? And your final test, of course, is with your refill, and it goes in no problem. And it doesn't wiggle around, so it's going to be nice and firm when you use it to write. The other thing you can do with copper, if you make a little bit of a boo-boo on here, you can actually, while it's in the collet chuck, you can do some actual metal spinning and put a flat surface against that with some lubricant. I'll just use this as an example. And basically you can work that copper because it's soft if you want to. If you touch it up or something. Yeah, I've had to cold work a few in the past just to save them. But that's always an option for you. And they're slippery. That's that piece completed. So that gets that done. So now we have to go to the actual bullet casing. And like I said before, we're going to do a 306 or 30-06. I like the 30-06. It's the most common. It's the easiest. Mathematically, everything works out really nice with it as well. As far as dimension-wise, when you're putting the whole pen together, and when I say dimension-wise, I mean the actual stick out of the pen tip in relation to the cap when you're pressing the mechanism in. So for the bullet casing itself, there's a few little tricks and things we need to do with it as we go. So here we have the 30-06 casing with the firing cap in it still. We need to take the firing cap out, and what I have is a punch that I have ground multiple times and modified this. I've actually modified this so I can do pretty much take the firing cap out of everything right up to a 50 cal. When we put this in, there's a little hole inside the firing cap on the inside. Or not in the firing cap, it's in the casing itself. It's what the firing cap pushes down against. Anyway, I feel it till I seat it, and it goes in there. Now my punch is against the firing cap, and all I'm going to do is take my hammer and just gently tap on this. Oop. There's the firing cap now. The firing cap is removed. So now we want to take this, and we basically want to polish up this casing before we start doing any more work to it. Of course, I've got a little mandrel that I've created. It's friction fit, or friction drive. That's how I'm going to drive it, especially when I put the right collet in it. So I have imperial collets that go all the way up to 3/4, and then I have another set just like this, except it's metric. And it's nice having both sizes. It lets me get really close to what I want to do with a lot of diameters. And they're nice for holding wood as well, for doing collet work. So there's my bullet on there. And what I'm going to do is drive my tailstock up to my live center. My live center is a one-way live center. Of course, it's got a pen turning tip in it. And the nice thing, I have the hole in the end now, so everything lines up. And I just put a little bit of pressure on it. Not too much, because it's, oh, I should lock that down. There. So now we can take, because we're going to clean up everything that we can see when we actually make the pen, because we're not going to see the top end. And of course, the bottom end will clean up enough on the edge when we do the polishing and that. And one of the other things when you're choosing your bullet, check your bullet to make sure it's got no dings, dents, scratches, like deep scratches, unless of course you want them. But I typically don't want them. I want them all to clean up and dress up real nice. And once again, I just go back at this. I start off with 600 grit. I want to just basically lightly clean this. And now first thing I'm looking for are dents and scratches and dings. Just take a quick survey. This one looks really good. So I'll finish dressing it up and then go at it with the 400, the 4/0 steel wool. If you have any dents or scratches, don't be too quick to throw the casing away or discard of it. I have been very successful in cleaning up bullet casings and actually being able to sand out defects, surprisingly enough. The other thing is, if there's a defect on the side where the window's going to go, it doesn't matter because you can just set that up in the jig when you go to sand the window casing out and remove it completely. And one other step with all of this too is you can keep going with the polishing. I do a bit of polishing. If I find my polishing buffer, I actually have a buffing wheel that I put in to buff it. And I drive this off a collet chuck with a 1/4 inch collet. And I just load it up and run it over it. And that's before. So, yeah,
When it
go
comes
ahead.
to the polishing and all of that, do you have to put a protectant on it so that it stays polished, or is this maintenance that the customer's gonna have to continue to do?
So it's a piece of brass. You can powder coat them. So powder coating has to be done before you do assembly. I have powder coated a few. It makes the pen expensive. And most guys don't want to pay that kind of money for it. You can do lacquer dipping. I've done plenty of lacquer dipping. It can be problematic in the lacquer dipping, and depending on the lacquer you use. I've had good results, I've had bad results. And most people are quite content with the brass tarnishing over time. If they're using it all the time, it's likely not going to tarnish. It's going to keep some sort of a nice finish to it. It's how much work do you want to put into it? Yeah, you can go all out on it. I've gone all out, and you have to charge the price. I mean, it's your time, right? And the process. Powder coating, the nice thing with powder coating is you can change the color, right? You can powder coat or whatever color you want. You can clear coat it. I haven't tried it, but they also sell a powder coating product. It's clear. You can actually dip it like a lacquer finish, but I hear it's expensive. It's like $90 a quart or something like that. I haven't really looked into it because I do a lot of regular bullet pens, just like this without the window casings. Those are easier to dip. This has a window in or two windows in it. It's more difficult to dip, but it's your choice what you want to do with it. I typically don't. It gets buffed up, and that's as far as I go with it.
Thank you.
Welcome. So that's the buffing of that. Now the only thing we have to do is drill this out, and then we can go put the window in it. So for drilling this out, I have found that as big a window as I can put in this, the best. And excuse me, through the process of making many pens, I have discovered that the inside of a casing is rather unique. The collet for this as well, I was going to go up one size, which is from what I was at to, what was it, 7/16? But it doesn't fit so well. So I went with the next collet up, which is even sloppier. But the thing you have to know about a bullet is about the last 3/8 of an inch in the bullet itself is thick, solid brass. And everything from 3/8 of an inch forward is very thin. And you will see that when we put the window in it. But when we drill it out, we'll see just how thick this is. So when I put this in the collet chuck, I put it in so that it's right up. But I'm grabbing on that big heavy duty piece of brass that's actually inside. And I'm forcing that collet down in size, which is okay. And what I found is 3/8 of an inch is the maximum size I want to go to on the ID. And I progressively get there. I'm going to center drill it first. That allows the drill bit to go in as true as we can get it. And this is a number 4 center drill. Always checking my lathe because I'm always locking it. And it's brass, it's not the funnest stuff to drill. So I'm way down at the bottom where the firing cap rests against, taking that out. My brush. And I'm not going to attack it with a 3/8 drill bit. I'm actually going to drill a 5/16 hole. These drill bits that I have here are cobalt. I love drilling with cobalt drills. I'll drill this out 5/16 and then I actually have chucking reamers. I'm going to ream this to the proper size. Just be careful when you're handling that swarf. It is very sharp. So that there is 5/16. If you're going to run a reamer in 1/16 of an inch undersize for your reamers. So this is a 3/8 reamer. You can't show you, but there's at least 3/8, if not 5/16 of an inch solid metal before it actually opens up into the bullet casing cavity. And now with the reamer, I'm basically going to make it size on size right into the top of the casing itself. And for this, you want the speed low. I'm just going to move my, I wish I had shorter chucking reamers, but I could use a little cutting fluid, but I'm just going to gently go in. We have a nice true 3/8 hole in there now. Of course, the nice thing with a collet chuck, we don't do very much damage, if any, to the outside of the casing. Right? Nothing we can't buff out. And there's our nice clean hole on the inside. And in case you're wondering, I've measured it. The OD is 400 thou, or just over 400 thou. The ID is 375, so we're roughly 12 to 14 thou wall thickness on that. And if you measure the wall thickness on the tips down here, they're about 10 thou. So there's lots of meat up here. So this is starting to become a delicate piece. And we will now go put the 2 windows in it. So to put the windows in these, I use an oscillating spindle sander. And I use a 3-inch drum for this. The reason I use a 3-inch drum is because of the curvature on the drum itself and the window you're taking out. So basically I'm going to slice out on both sides 2 windows, and because there's a mandrel that goes through this, the same as like turning between centers, we don't want to destroy the mandrel. Sorry, I had to have a drink, a little parched. This is my mandrel. And basically what I have here is I have two caps, and on the caps, let me zoom in a little for you. For the caps themselves, there's 2 different diameters. So as you guess it, one is 3/8 and the other one is 300 thou for the inside of the casing for there. And this one fits in the top like that, nice fit. So these are custom made. I could change the size of that hole, then I would have to custom make another bushing. So it's basically these are bushings. I would have to make another bushing to fit in there. So, and this is just a piece of round bar, ready rod. I've just tapped the ends for 1/4 inch thread. Make sure the window or the bullet casing is going to fit between it with some bushings. And I use a wing nut to tighten it down. There's a little bit in the setup of this. And of course, I forgot to mention, there's flats. And the reason there's flats on this is so that once I get it set up in this little jig, that it sits on my base, and then I can rotate the whole thing 180 degrees, and my window casings are parallel to each other. By that, I've got one here. This is what we're going to end up with when we're done. So the space on this thickness width is going to be the same on both sides when we're done. So now we're going to lay out this casing here for the window. And basically what I do is I split the difference between the last step in the window edge and the step here in the window edge. You can get all fancy and measure it. I basically eyeball it is really good. Eyeballing it will get you what you want. So I set that down so it's flat, sitting on the surface. I actually have to move it out of the side, but I'll just zoom out a bit here. So I put it over on the edge, my flat washer on, my wing nut on. Now, I haven't done it yet, but I need to take the tabs down on my wing nut because as you can see, they're wider than the piece is. So basically I have to snug it up and then rotate it backwards. And then I can hold it down firmly and then tighten it. Otherwise, if you don't, one of these bushings might turn and then this thing will rock. It won't be sitting flat. So now I've got it sitting there. It's not rocking, it's flat. So now I can lay out for my window. And it's typically around 5/16 of an inch to the edge of the window, which is approximately that far from there to there. It's about 5/16 there. And then we eyeball the center, which is about there. The center is important. And then we just want to transfer those around the edge. So, not sure if you can see it on the camera. It's a little hard to see. I'll zoom in again. Start this process. As you can see, I have a line scribed on here. That's my center line. This line here is my mistake. I actually got my center line wrong when I first made this plate up. It's just a piece of Lexan, and the plate is just to keep the water off my nice carbon steel surface so that I can don't have to worry about rust and all that other stuff in case I walk away and forget about it, because I'm going to be having water. You're going to need water to keep this cool. We generate a lot of heat here. And that's basically everything before we start to grind the window out, or the windows out. Are there any questions before I turn the sander on?
None yet.
Okay.
Just a quick little on when you made your bushings, do you have a metal lathe as well that you do your own stuff on, or did you have those made for you?
No, I was fortunate enough to pick up a Grizzly mill lathe combo. So it came out of the States, because in Canada, it would have been made by Craftex. It's exactly the same. It's actually identical. This one's a Grizzly. I'm glad I found it because in Canada, you can't run the mill head or the lathe head at the same time, but on a Grizzly, you can because the laws are different. And the reason I like it is because I can actually use the feed table on my tool rest as a feed table while I'm milling. So I can actually mill it without having to turn it by hand. I can actually use the feed of the lead screw to do that. So,
Okay.
and it's a nice machine to have. I was sending stuff out for machining, and if you don't get it quite right, you got to go back to the machine shop. They got to set up again. They charge you again. It got real expensive, real fast. So, yeah, I scored this for about 800 Canadian. And I've done lots of work. I probably invested $3,000 Canadian just in tooling for it. So it's nice to have that at my disposal. And the bushings are just, they're brass, so they're easy to machine. I mean, if you really wanted to, you could probably do it on your metal lathe. I've turned lots of metal on my metal lathe. All right, let's sand these out. And basically, I should point out, so I'm sanding an arc that goes from this black line all the way to this black line on both sides. And once I reach those black lines, I stop. That's my arc in the window. I do the same on the opposite side. And we don't want to go much wider than what I've set it at. You can go narrower. If you go narrower, what it does is it makes the window, the brass, it makes the brass across the top wider. By going this wide of a window, it starts to get pretty narrow, and it becomes weak. We don't want that to become too weak, right? There's actually a lot of strength in this, but yeah, you don't want to go thinner than that or narrower. So I've got a little pail of water here. I just throw it in the pail of water. Then before I put it back up on top, I take my dry filings or swarf, I just move them away.
What grit paper are you using?
I believe this is 120 grit paper. I'm glad you asked that question. You can go to a coarser sandpaper, and what a coarser sandpaper does, if you want to, and this is part of the window casing, I guess this is the artistic side of this, because you polished it in this direction on the outside of the casing. Now your sanding lines are going around, and these sanding lines are going this way, opposing, right? If you go to a coarser sandpaper, you put coarser lines in here, right? This isn't the only sanding I do. I have another sanding mandrel because I actually polish them up a bit. But I could make my other sanding mandrel with a coarser sandpaper. You're going to see it here shortly. It's right one of the next steps after I get this finished. But yeah, probably should be running a coarser sandpaper just that it puts the window in it faster, right? But as you can see, it doesn't take long to put the first window in, right? So now because we have the nice flats on the bushings, I just rotate this 180 degrees and I repeat the whole process on the opposite side. And my two windows are sanded in. So I'm rotating it to see that my windows at the top are in the same spot, and they're pretty close. You have to be careful now, because if you move this accidentally or don't touch it down properly, you could score the top edge, which means you have to open the window up. So you have to be very careful when you bring it back in. I'm just checking to make sure that I'm getting the whole radius. It's a little longer in the bottom. It's not bad, it's not bad, not a big deal. There. My windows are done. I just have to clean them out now. First, we need to cool it off. Yeah, so I've just got a little pail of water is all I've got here. And before I bring it back up, I make sure you take all that dry swarf away. I actually collect that dry swarf and I use it for filling cracks and voids and whatever. So it's kind of nice to use the byproduct for something else. So now I just take this apart.
Fine enough.
Sorry, what was that?
Definitely seems fine enough.
Oh, it is. It's very fine. Yeah, so the trick to putting the window in is all in this jig, right? And as you can see, it's down, it's, I might have to make another one soon. But no, I typically don't go any deeper than that. It's just as I keep turning it into a different location, eventually this will be whatever diameter it ends up at when it's been completely sanded on all surfaces. But yeah, that's the trick to making the window right there. So now we want to sand up the window casing. So now what we've got is a whole bunch of swarf inside this casing, very sharp, and we want to remove that. So for cleaning up the inside, we get to be creative. And a very, very basic tools for cleaning this. 1/4-inch dowel with some 600 grit sandpaper, and I just use the 3M, what's that, 77 adhesive, spray adhesive, to put that on, and then I just have another wooden dowel, and all I'm doing here is basically using the dowel to break that edge, and by rubbing the sharp edge on the wood, clean that up. It just helps get that out of there. It's very thin. You can actually tear it off. Just be careful. And just be careful working with this. If you're holding both ends and working it, you could actually bend those and twist them. Sometimes we don't know our own strength.
For cleaning, you said these are once fired brass casings. Do you clean them prior, or do they still have a bunch of burnt powder on the inside?
So they're still burnt on the inside. And I'm gonna show you how I clean what I clean on the end. I don't worry about the inside of the casing so much. I could put them in a tumbler, I guess, and I've got a tumbler, I could tumble them. But I don't find by drilling this out to 3/8, by the time I put the window in it, you really don't see the inside of the casing, which is nice. So with my sandpaper, I'm just going to lightly sand this on the edges. And then for the windows themselves, so if I hold it like that, we have a gap, but as I lean it, and the more I lean it, the more it matches that radius. So I just lean it a little bit and clean it up. I don't know if you can see that, but it broke the brass away. On the inside, it's nice and clean now. This takes a bit of time to do, but of course you've got the end open because it's basically the same diameter now down through. I can actually come in from the end and just lightly sand that from the back side. And if you put a few sanding marks on the window, don't worry about it because we're going to address that here shortly. This is to get all the burrs off. And then we do the same thing on the opposite end. It's a little more work to do this one. There. That's all cleaned up now. Now there's a few marks on the window, but I'm going to address that here in a second. I've turned a spindle, 3-inch diameter, or actually just a shade under, wrapped sandpaper and glued it on. And basically what I've done is I've recreated my oscillating spindle sander, except this one's got a finer grit on it. And this is what I'm using for my finishing, now that I've got my window all cleaned out. Okay, yeah, so this is basically another sanding mandrel. Now we have to start being careful. We can do it by hand on here. It takes quite a while. One of the other things, now that this is so thin, we don't want to bend it or deform it. We put a lot of time into it. And we don't want to scuff up the edges, the leading edges, because those lines run perpendicular to the sanding lines we put around it. So what we can do is basically lightly sand this. And then do the other side. Now, if you're confident, you have to be careful because you got to remember you're working with sharp surfaces now. Just set it down. There's one little sanding detail I didn't like off the sanding machine. So I'm just fixing that. And that's pretty much got the window fixed up. We'll give that inside another light sand. I'm just going to touch this up once more. That's our window. It has a nice sharp edge. So we're just going to lightly sand that just to take that little burr off. There. That's the window casing addressed. Now you could put a coarser sandpaper on and go back and put a coarse window in it, right? Leave it fine like it is. It's entirely up to you what you do with that window. When I mentioned the nickel plated casings before, this is what's nice about a nickel plated casing is you end up with nickel with a brass window, right? So I'm actually going to go over and I'm just going to lightly put the window back in this, but coarse. So I'm just going to put it on by hand. There. That gives us a nice, you get two different textures, which looks nice. So now the next thing we want to do, we want to look at putting the bullet tip into the casing. And a couple different ways we can do this. We're going to need some, I use 5-minute epoxy. Because I have collet chucks, I take full advantage of them. The nice thing about collet chucks is they hold everything true and center. The nice thing about the one-way live center is I can put the adapter on with a 1'8" thread. And mount my other collet chuck to it. I just lightly tighten that down. That's why you lightly tighten it down. Now to give the CA, or not, sorry, CA, to give the epoxy something to bite onto, I'm going to scuff up the copper and then put a bit of epoxy in the end. But not before. That's what I forgot to show you. That's a step I forgot. We talked about cleaning. Okay, bottle brushes. So nice to have. Because you can actually clean up the inside, right? And then of course on the other end, I have a smaller, broader brush. And that cleans it up. Let's address this first and then we'll put it back together. So I put a couple little marks, just something for the epoxy to grab onto, and I'm just going to use my Cindy Drozda tool here. That's all I want, just some scores, just something for that epoxy to grab onto. Right. So we're just going to put a little epoxy on the inside. Just a little touch. There. Right, so let that sit for a minute or two. We'll take it off. And I can come back. We'll talk about the last little bit. So the last part is the top of the pen and the body of the pen. And what we want to do, we all know how to make a slimline pen. So I didn't bother going through all that with you. I've got one mocked up with the epoxy in it for the tube. And we're just going to go through and talk about clean up the end. find our brass. And these are the actual lengths that come in the kit. Now, if you make your pen, one of them too long and it has extra material on the end, don't worry about that. Just square the end up like that. And you can leave, you don't have to go down to the brass tube. Just remember, this is the end that has to go into the bullet casing. This one can be a little bit longer. It's actually better if it is, but it doesn't have to be. All right. So this would be your bottom in your pen body, and this would be the cap when you put the two together. So since I said we were going to do one in red, this is the pieces that I've done here. And if you'll notice I did it on purpose. I left this one long, so this one's actually longer. And this is the end that's going to go down inside the casing, right? So because it's going to go in the casing, we're going to turn this one first. And I turn everything on a mandrel, such as this. And when I set it up on the lathe, that's the end. When it goes in the lathe, I set it up like that so that I know that's the end that's going down into the casing itself. So I made up a little jig. And it's just a reference jig. And this is inside the casing. This actually represents the taper and the window. All right. And then how much material to the top of the casing. So basically I can put this on here and I know I've got that much material, and I can use it as a reference as I'm turning it. And also I can use it as a reference for the diameters as well. So we'll go over back to the lathe. We'll pop the casing out. It should be set up enough. So what I've done is taken it out, the collet, and I'm just going to set this aside. And that can continue to cure while I work on this. So I know this is the end that's going in the casing. So this is my reference this way. So I know my diameter at the top end is going to be 3/8. It can pretty much be 3/8 all the way down to the end, and then I have to make the taper. And one thing about bullet casings that you may not know, they are tapered down the length. So basically I'll turn it 3/8 and then put a slight taper. I have another casing here, so I can use another casing as a reference while I'm turning it. And I like to turn all my pen blanks with a bowl gouge, believe it or not. Just my choice. Just seems to, it's always suited me well. And to fine tune it down, I go switch over to my skew, which is modified into a scraper.
Now those bushings, they're just there for spacers, right? You're turning
Yeah.
everything to caliper?
Yeah, because I'm not, I'm turning to the inside diameter of the bullet casing. I'm not turning to the diameter of the bushing. I guess with a metal lathe, I could make up my own bushings, couldn't I? Very close.
Dave, there was a question. What kind of wood are you using?
So this is a piece of spalted maple. It's actually got a bit of curly in it as well. And I noticed that my pen blank is just a shade long. Sorry, I just took the pen mill and cleaned the end down on that. Ah. I always tighten my nut last before I do the I do the mandrel first, and then I do the nut on the thing afterwards. The fitting is the worst part. So it's just a shade long. There we are. So it's inside, it's not proud, and it fills up that whole window. It's exactly what we wanted. Now that we know it's going to fit, we actually need to do a quick finish on it. Just some 600 grit. The one nice thing about the window casing pen, if there's anything you see you don't like, we even have a little spot to hide it. So for finishing, I like to use a little bit of brushing lacquer. You don't have to. If you've got time, you can do a few other finishes, but and this is just brushing lacquer I have. This actually, I was actually fortunate enough to win this little jar from Dick Singh. So it's kind of nice to have that. It's been gets treated with care. It's just a beautiful little thing to have. I'm just afraid I've never looked for another jar that the lid fits, but I hope I never break it. So there's a little bit of brushing lacquer. My speed way down, not that far down. Nice thing about brushing lacquer is, or lacquer in general, just so fast drying. And it leaves like a nice satiny finish. I'm not a big gloss person. So the only thing I gotta do now is put a couple little grooves in for some epoxy. So it tells me I gotta take just a little bit off the end, which I'm not worried about, but it fits in there nice. We still have to give that a quick buff. So one thing I like to do to help when it comes to the assembly, before I get there, is I have a reaming tool, and I just like to ream the inside of that brass tube before I ever try and put the mechanism in. There. Then we'll just take and buff that up. That's finished. Turn the top, and it's done. So one end of this, we already know the diameter, because we can actually turn it to the bushing, because the bushing has to match the pen. Or the finial. And then the other end has to match the top of the bullet casing itself. So basically we're just turning a taper.
Hey Dave, what's the reasoning behind having your bushings loose at this point?
So I can get the finish on the ends.
Good reason.
Brushing lacquer is nice to work with. The nice part is if you want to, you can come back after with spray lacquer. Brushing lacquer is high in solids. And it makes a great sanding sealer. Of course, we all know some sanding sealers lacquer. So no, it's got this has a nice satin finish to it. It's not glossy. That's the way I like it. Okay, what do we got left? Just got to buff out this casing. If you get collet chuck, always check the inside of your collet to make sure it's clean and doesn't have a whole bunch of dust in it. And I'm just using a bit of high gloss polishing compound. It's the green. This is the part in the process where we get dirty. At least our fingers get dirty. So this is why I have a little stick. And it basically lets me do my thing. Be careful on the sharp edge. This is why we have to do this now before we actually put the piece in it. Otherwise, we would destroy the piece we just turned on the lathe. A little bit of epoxy lead came out, not a big deal. Always in a cure for epoxy. A little bit of acetone. All polished up. And I'm just going to go touch up those lines on the window. And then we'll glue in the blank. Fits nice, looks nice.
It's gorgeous.
Now, yes. Oh, I don't like this part. It's the only part I don't like about epoxying this in. So this is always a bit of an act.
Can you swap your camera before you get started?
Which camera do you want to see?
Wherever you're working.
I'm working right here.
Okay. That'll work.
Yep. So what I'm going to do is I got to put epoxy down inside where the fitting is going to go. And I fit this in. Now with this sitting out, put it in, and then I just twist it around. Take it out. I just gently wipe up any excess epoxy. And that's the bottom half complete. I'll clean it up a little bit yet, but before I send it down, but that's the bottom half complete.
Very nice.
Top half's easy. just press in the finial and the clip, and it's done. And then I can talk about the mechanism going in. So you wanted a rifle clip, correct?
That would be fine.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be great.
No, I've got a couple different clips, so I wanted to make sure before I jumped into this too far. So do you want the one with the scope or without?
I'd say
Scope would be
scope.
fine.
So I don't own a pen press. Well, a store-bought pen press. I figure my lathe came with a pen press, that's good enough for me. So all I did was took a couple of these Morse taper weldable fittings and drilled them out and turned a couple Delrin bushings. Fit in the tapers respectively. And that is my pen press. And we simply put that on there. I don't like these pressing these in, but now before I get too far, see if there's anything I don't want anybody to see, and I don't see anything. Oh, I might want to show off that spalting. Yeah, I want to show off the spalt. There's the top of the pen done. With your rifle clip. I can't put the mechanism in this casing because I need the epoxy to cure. All right, so that will come, but what I will show you is on another casing. So I have this jig for putting in the twist mechanisms, and it's the only way you can do it. Unless you're strong enough to push it in by hand. And that's without damaging the casing. So what I've got with this item here, just going to loosen the screws off. So what I've got on the inside is basically, it's like a collet, all right, except it's a die. And this die has a groove around the very top on both sides. And that groove matches the groove on the bullet casing. Normally, traditionally, we would put this between centers and we would push the mechanism into the casing. But we have a couple of issues. One, we have nothing to push against. On the end, it's so thin, we're going to crush it, right? We destroyed all that work, all right? And then the other thing is, should we happen to do anything, this is all the strength we have in the side. So we don't want to rely on that either. So what happens is we basically take the pen. Oh, sorry, those are for 270s. Here we go. Get the right ones. We put this in here. Put the other half on. And then what we do is we put this inside here, and these go down and they bottom out. And then we tighten it back together. Now we're holding on to the outside of the casing. We're not touching the sides of the window, and we're not touching the bullet tip, which is right there, right? So then what we do is we put our mechanism in like that. Now we can press the twist mechanism in. We press it in and we stop. We get our refill. Put a refill in and twist it in till it bottoms out and we see where it is. So I've got another 3/16 of an inch to go. Just about. So there's our projection out through the tip. It's actually quite nice. The taper on the refill just arcs and follows the contour of the bullet casing or the bullet tip. It's exactly what we want. So now we know where that goes. That's our mechanism installed. And I think we all know what the next step is. We would then take our top off and put it together, completing the pen. Unfortunately, I can't put the mechanism in the one we did tonight, but that's how you put the twist mechanism in. Are there any questions?
Did you make that holder?
Yep, that was my, I had to figure out a way to get the mechanisms in, right? It just sort of it was a roadblock I ran into. It was like, wow, what am I going to do? Right? I need to hold on to this somehow without touching the tip or the sides of the casing. And I need to be able to push. And the only thing that was left to push on was this little lip on the actual top end of the bullet casing itself. Well, I guess I got to make a die. So I basically turned two halves, put them in a chuck after I split them, and then proceeded to machine a groove on the inside of the die block on both halves at once. And then once I had that all figured out, I made up the block to put the die into. And that's the second die block I've made. So I've got 2 die blocks, and all the pieces that fit into all the dies will fit in either die block. So basically I make the inside of the die. I've got one for the 270s, a 30-06, and then the 300 mags. And I've been using those ever since. I've never had to make any more, just the way I go.
Smart.
That was my millwrighting and machining background that came in came in handy for me.
Very nicely done.
I apologize for it taking so long, but it's a long process.
I didn't mind.
It was worth it just to see the stick. Thank you. It was a very good presentation.
Very nice.
Agreed.
So once
Yeah.
once that epoxy cures up, I'll wait till tomorrow before I press that together, but yeah, I'll get it all done and pressed up, and I gotta give that brass just one more little touch up, and it'll be on its way down to see you.
Excellent.
Great.
We really appreciate it.
Very nice. Very nice.
Yes, looking forward to winning that one.
You can't, I can.
Oh, no.
Oh, Lord. Well, I appreciate your time, Dave. It was a good demonstration.
Oh,
I'm
thank
thinking
you.
about heading out to Bass Pro Shop tomorrow. We'll look for lead pieces in the casings.
I don't know if I have,
They're hard to come by right now.
what's
Yeah.
that, the lead?
Any of it, anything for reloading is very hard to come by.
Yeah, I'm just seeing where my casings were, or my bullet tips. I'm not even sure. Well, maybe this is the box here. Look at that full metal jacket. Yeah. It's the Horn Days, 150 grain.
Okay, 150 grain.
Number 3037.
Okay.
And those work for the 308s as well. Yep, those, that's them right there.
Okay.
And I
Hey,
like
Julie.
I like these ones because they have a long body to go inside the bullet casing. Right? They sell another one, but it's got a short, the impression is further up, and it's shorter. You don't have as much to go inside the casing. I don't like those.
All right. Thanks, Dave.
Yep, thanks for having me.
Y'all have a good one.
Yep,
Thanks, Dave.
bye.